Oh, hello. I'm so glad you could both come. I've just been writing a letter to my son Jones. He's still in Louisiana with the 26th Massachusetts Regiment. You probably heard that I had two sons fighting in the war. Well, now Swift is working for the railroad. You know, he's building bridges and laying track just as fast as the Confederates can tear it up. Well, faster, I'm sure. But then he was always very enterprising. You know, before the war, he had a business, but he also was cutting granite and he had a crew working for him. I don't think he made so much money doing that as he had so many to pay, but that was good experience for him. Being a boss, having a crew working for him. My middle son, Jones, you know, he's been soldiering ever since the war broke out, and now his term of enlistment is almost over. I hope and pray that he won't re-enlist. I think it's time he came home and had some rest, don't you? Oh, let me tell you what Eliza said. She wanted to give her brother a piece of her mind on this subject. Let me read it to you so I'm sure I get it right. She told me to tell him, "Let some go that have stayed home and enjoyed what others have been fighting for. There's plenty more that can go as well as you. I know a number of lazy loafers living at home with their mothers, too lazy to peel their own potatoes." Well, you know, Eliza, she was always very forthright. I hope he won't re-enlist. But you know, Jones is 23 now, so when they get to that age, they do what they want. Oh, I wanted to show you. Here's Jones's latest photograph. Photography, I think that is one invention that was actually worthwhile. You know, Sarah Blood and Laura Jones were by the other day and they looked at his photograph. Well, you know Laura. It pains her to say anything too nice about someone. So she looks at this photograph of my handsome son and what does she say? "Can't Jones support a mustache or some whiskers? I should think he might." I try to write to Jones every 3 weeks. Though it's spring planting, I let it go a little longer, but you know, those of you who live on a farm, no one has a moment to sit down during planting. And then, well, my daughter Hepzibeth, she can write 2 or 3 letters to my one. She just does it so quick. Oh, I have to remember to call her Augusta now. Though she's been called Hepzibeth all her life, now that she's 18, she won't answer to it anymore. Well, of course, Augusta is her middle name. Oh, and the latest. She does not want to share her letters from her brother Jones with anyone, not even her own mother. I had to tell Jones, please address his letters to me and not always to Augusta. I suppose we've spoiled her, but you know, when she was little, the doctor said she had a weak heart, and so we never wanted her to work too hard. Well, doctors don't know everything. I have noticed over the years that parties and dances never seem to tire her. Yet the sight of a sink full of dirty dishes, well, it's enough to make her quite weary. Well, she's going to visit her sisters in South Elliott, Maine for a few weeks, and that will make a very pleasant change. For Augusta, I mean. Some of you are writing to your sons who are soldiers and sailors, and so you know how they like to hear news from home. So I try to remember all the tidbits of gossip, who's gotten married in Acton, and who's had babies. But you know what they really want to hear about is about their dogs, and about what luck their younger brother Jonathan has had with fishing and hunting. Well, Jones wanted I should save him one of Queen's puppies. You know, Queen is Swift's famous hunting dog. And I had to write and tell him that I sold all the puppies. But that's because of this new law in Acton. Have you heard about this? That all dogs have to be licensed now? And a license costs $1 for each and every dog. Well, that gets to be expensive. Let's see, I wrote Jones news about hunting and fishing. I told him about those Simmons boys who caught 52 pounds of pickerel and perch at Nagog Pond. And oh, Jonathan, he's been catching muskrats and skunks and partridges and rabbits. I wrote Jones. I told him that our swamp is just full of rabbits, just waiting for him to come home and kill them. Don't let me forget to thank you. You've been so kind in sharing your newspapers and saving clippings for us from about the 26th Regiment. We stopped taking a paper because we were cutting down on expenses. And then we shut off all but 3 rooms this past winter to save on fuel. You know, that secondhand stove I bought heats all that space just fine. Jones asked me to tell him what prices were like here in Acton on food and dry goods. And I looked back over my account book. Do you know that things have gone up by half in the past 3 years since the war began? Why, shoes that Father paid 60 cents a pair for are $1.75 now. Well, and I went to look for some meat last week, and beef was 12 cents to 14 cents a pound. Well, everything is just so high, we don't buy much. Still, I suppose things are worse in other places. Jones wrote and said that flour is over $50 a barrel in New Orleans, and that was in this winter, so it's probably more now. With both Swift and Jones gone, we've thought about hiring some help. But, you know, with the Army and the Navy salaries and the recruitment bonuses, help is scarce and high. So we have to do all the work ourselves. Jonathan, well, he's not even 15 yet. And he helped Father do the plowing and plowed up the back pasture for oats this past spring. So, you know, we put in our usual, the peas and the cabbages and carrots and corn, and we finally got in all the potatoes. So maybe in the fall, when we get to thrashing the oats and picking the apples, we might have someone in, a hired hand, for a little while. We'll see. Well, if things are a little hard here, at least the war is good for the shipbuilding business. You know my son-in-law, William Lidstrom, I think I mentioned him to you. Well, he's working at the Portsmouth Naval Yard now, and they pay skilled carpenters $2.50 a day now. But some of those private yards, you know, they're paying $2.75 to $3 a day for carpenters. Well, you know why that is. That's because some of them are building Confederate privateers. And you know, those men from Maine and New Hampshire, some of them aren't too particular about who is paying them. Well, the sailors and the whalers and the fishermen, they aren't neutral about the war anymore. Not since the Confederate ship, the Alabama, has been burning and sinking so many of their commercial vessels right here in New England waters. I wanted to send Jones some, you know, some turkeys roasted at Christmas and Thanksgiving and some mince pies and such things. But they tell me that he's too far from the railroad and that anything I send him would be spoiled before it got there. So we don't send him any food except apples sometimes. Still, they send us packages, especially Jones. He sent a package for Jonathan with some shoes, boots, and shirts this past winter. And it just fit him, so we didn't have to buy him any clothes. It was wonderful.
Good boy.
They've always been kind to their mother, both Swift and Jones. Did I tell you that they paid off the rest of what we owed to Mr. Tuttle on the farm? Well, I was so grateful. You know, Father had sold both oxen and the old cow and the red heifer, and we didn't know how we were going to pay off the rest of it before we were too old to work. So that was just hanging heavy on our minds, and those boys knew that. They sent the money to Eliza, and she came over with it. I was so surprised. Well, that was a kind thing, and I do hope they won't be poorer for it. Oh, Jones has been up to some mischief, though. Did you hear about the Ezekiel Symes prank? Well, Jones and some of his friends in Company E made up this big story about a friend of theirs. Well, there never was any such person as Ezekiel Symes, but they pretended this poor, shy young man had no one to write to him and wanted a female correspondent. So they took the opportunity to write to some young ladies in Acton with this story, and more than one flirted quite a bit with this imaginary soldier. Then Captain Chapman wrote to all the girls and told them who had really been writing them those letters. You know, Jones was with Butler's men in New Orleans and took part in the capture of that city. And then he was put in the medical purveyor's office. So he stayed behind while the rest of the regiment went out on that Red River campaign. Well, that campaign didn't go so well, and I told him he was better off staying where he was, where he had a good roof over his head and a good bed to sleep in and regular meals. I think he might be safer in the medical office, but I don't know. I'm sure poor Mrs. Reed thought her son William was safer where he was. You know, he was guarding Confederate prisoners at the Opelousas courthouse, and he had a good roof over his head and good fires. But he took sick anyway this past winter, and then he died. Did you hear? That poor, poor woman. And he was such a nice young man. He was a good friend of Jones's. Well, this is what I worry about. That Jones will get sick. And you know, more men in his regiment have died from illness than battle. Well, I hear that's true in most regiments. Well, you know, Jones asked for news about the farm animals. He wanted to know if all the ones he remembered were still on the farm, and I told him that the black heifer had a calf last week. Oh, and we have 2 of the handsomest pigs you ever did see. And turkeys, of course. You know, I've always had good luck with my turkeys. I have 46 of them now. My chickens, they don't do so much, but I still have 35 of them. So what with, you know, slopping the hogs and feeding the poultry and weeding the garden, oh, my goodness, I am busy managing the dairy. Do you know I've been making butter for sale? I got 50 cents a pound for it this past winter. Oh, I wish I could send some to Jones. It wouldn't get very far, would it? No. So I've been busy with that, and I've been, you know, braiding straw for hats and making drawers for sale, yes. I'm busy with all such work. It's good to be busy sometimes, keep your mind off things. I wrote Jones that Father wants that he should come home when his term is out and not re-enlist. And Father wanted I should tell him that he planted 4 elms. Did you see those 4 young elm trees out front? And he said to tell Jones when he comes home, he can just lie in the shade of those elms and take his rest. And then at the end of the summer, he can help Father eat the watermelons he's planted. Well, I hope the war will be ended soon, and that all the soldiers and sailors will come home, don't you? And that we won't have any war anymore. Well, now Jonathan has promised me that he would post this letter for me, so I should try and catch him now before he leaves. You have been very kind in your visits. Help me keep my mind off things. So if you'll excuse me, I'll be taking off to catch Jonathan. Thank you very much.